we're back on another floor, which means we're about to go on a little bit of a weird adventure. And this one is about generative fill. So you've probably seen the whole like set extension thing. Like let's just take out these tripod legs. So you've probably seen this before about like set extensions and just kind of taking a plate. But recently I saw this video from Paolo and it absolutely blew my mind, and I just really wanted to recreate it. And lucky enough, he has a bunch of really great tutorials already on his channel, and I'll link those in the description below. But what I'm going to try to do today is try to create the simplest form and method from going from Photoshop and creating generative fill video. So we're going to take inspiration straight from Paolo and use his method of creating watercolor images, and we're going to turn that into video. And I'm hoping I can make some sort of system from Photoshop to kind of just batch make all the frames, and that's a journey we're going to go on today. So buckle in and hopefully we learn something along the way. So yeah, let's get to it. Okay, we're outside. I'm with my friend Nolan. We're gonna bike around the city a little bit, and I got the trusty handy cam and gonna import some footage of whatever we get into the computer, and I'll meet you there. Okay, so that's the footage that we're going to be working with, and we're going to try to change the entire vibe into watercolor. So the first step here is to export that video from DaVinci Resolve as an image sequence. So let's do that right now. So inside DaVinci Resolve, I'm going to make a new timeline here, and I'm just going to call this drop frames. So DaVinci Resolve actually has a timeline limitation, and you can see the lowest that we can go is 16 frames a second. Ideally, you would want at least 12, because if you're playing back in a 24 timeline, you could have each frame of the image sequence play back for 2 frames, and it would be back to 24 frames per second. And we just want Photoshop to be making the least amount of frames so that there isn't all this like funky flicker that's happening at the end when all the frames are playing back to back. So if you have something like Media Coder, you can actually come in when you're exporting and drop it to literally whatever you want. Paolo actually suggests 8 frames a second, but again, play around and see what works, but less is definitely better in this scenario. Back in Resolve, we're just going to create a 16 frame per second timeline, and then we're going to grab our sequence that we need, which is the city montage, add some in and outs, and we're going to pop over into the Deliver tab. And now you can come over to Format and change to any image file that you want. I'm going to hit JPEG for this, and the frame rate's at 16 and we can't go any lower. And I'm actually going to drop this down into 1080 just so it's a quicker, easier render. Add a file name and then hit Add to Render Queue and hit Render. Okay, cool. First step is down. Okay, so now that we have our image sequence, now I'm going to hop over into Photoshop Beta and do the generative fill watercolor style. And for this, I actually followed Paolo's tutorial, so I won't be walking you through step by step for this part, but I do have a Photoshop action that you can download and just pretty much follow along with the one click that I'm doing. And my idea right now is just to run that Photoshop action with one click, and it'll batch render all the frames in the image sequence. That way, all we have to do is click it once, and then we can just walk away. And when we come back, we'll have an entirely done watercolor image sequence. So let's hop into Photoshop right now and see what the best percentage is that we want to generate our frames based off of. So basically what I mean here when I'm saying that is how much information is it actually taking from the original image. If we start all the way here at 80%, we're basically letting Photoshop only take 20% of the info in the background here. 50% is where we actually start seeing something. And let's jump down to 30, which I feel like is a happy medium style-wise. And then I have a bunch of increments here. This is 20%, this is 10%, and this is 5%, just adding a little bit of watercolor to the image. 30 is definitely where my cutoff would be. I don't think I would jump up to 50 for this type of scenario. I think for our case, I think we could go maybe with 20 here and see what kind of funky results we're gonna get. And before we move on here, I just wanna mention this prompt here. There's a few that you can choose from. So this is watercolor, obviously, but there's also pencil sketch, oil paint, and cartoon vector that you can choose from within Adobe. Okay, so the last step here is to create an action. So I'm in my actions panel here. I'm just gonna click on this icon, and this is going to be the 16 frames per second watercolor. So now we're gonna hit record, and what we want to do is we want to run this 20% watercolor. And once it's done doing that, we want to go to File, Save a Copy, and I want to find where I want to save it, and I just want to save it in that folder and hit OK and stop. And you can see that all this is going to do now is play action 20% and then save it to the folder that we selected. So now we're going to batch automate everything by coming up to File, Automate, Batch, and we have the action selected now, 16 frame watercolor export. Now we're going to navigate to the source folder where the original frames are sitting. So right here is where I exported everything right from DaVinci, and this export folder is where they're all going to end up. And hit OK and hurry up and wait. Okay, before we go into the final results here, I just want to shout out the music service that you've been listening to pretty much this entire video, and that's audio.com. They recently launched Audio Originals, which are original tracks just created for this music subscription site. And trust me, I know that there's so many audio subscription sites out there, but the thing I like about Audio is that they have a tier system for pricing. So they actually have a plan where you can get lifetime subscription access, which for me is a no-brainer. But if that price tier isn't what you're looking for, they also have a regular yearly subscription. And if you use the code SAVE70 right now, you can get 70% off your first year on your Audio subscription. And honestly, I have no complaints about the site. They have a sound effect library as well as a great music selection. I've always been able to find tracks, and you've been listening to their music this entire time in the video. Thank you for listening to that. Now let's get back to the video and check out the final results for the watercolor style. Okay, so I've imported all the frames into DaVinci Resolve and dragged them all onto the timeline. And the last thing I want to show you is just some little tips that I think make it a little better. So my first tip here is to animate on twos. Make each frame at least 2 frames or 3 or 4 frames, but don't make it 1. There'll be too much in each frame and it just won't look that nice. So we tied everything up there. Everything is 2 frames. From there, we're gonna hit edit and delete gaps to shrink it all. Wow, okay. The final thing I like to do here is actually nest the whole thing and deflicker it. So you can do this on the edit page, but I'm gonna hop into Fusion and just add a deflicker, and maybe even keep the deflicker off until you're ready to export, because it will definitely impact your playback and render time. So wait till the very end to add that. Yeah, let's take a look at the final product here. I am pretty mind blown by the results, and I'm really happy with them, and I hope you enjoyed watching this, and I hope you go over to Paolo's channel and hit that subscribe button, because the work he's doing over there is really, really sick, and I'm stoked to see what he does next. And if you want the Photoshop actions to do one-click generative fill in Photoshop Beta, also in the description, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.